Yes, a week from now, you're going to all receive an email that has the link to the recording, and that is good for 30 days. And then once that is done, we have on our website the research webinar archives, and those include both the link to the recording on YouTube and the PowerPoint slides. So, and we're going to be posting a lot of these links also during the webinar today. So you'll have a link to how to get to that webinar archive.
Absolutely. Thanks, Barbara. So Barbara is our manager of research at QM. She is part of our huge research department of 3 people. I think Lee, our data analyst, is here as well today. And as Barbara mentioned, we're going to be sharing a lot of links in the chat with you today. So when I talk about something, Barbara's going to share the direct link in the chat, but those links are also going to be included in the PowerPoints that will be associated with the presentation. All right, with that, welcome everybody to QM Research Roundup. This is our final QM Research webinar of 2021, Surveys, Supports, and Synergy. I really appreciate all of you joining me today. So what does QM Research do? So I think that most people, when they think of QM Research, they think about the research that supports the rubric, but we do a lot more. So we wanted to talk to you today about ways that we support you and can collaborate with you. So we support Quality Matters products, tools, processes, and goals, essentially the QM framework. It's all supported by research. We also provide individual consultation, especially for doctoral researchers that are thinking of doing research on quality assurance in online or QM specifically. And we also have training options for those of you that want to conduct research for distance learning. We also work a lot with our community of researchers. So if you are among those and you want to get connected to us, we're going to give you some information on how to do that. We also disseminate and promote and talk a lot about the research that is out there that is pertinent to the work that you do on your campuses. And with that mention of campuses, before I get started, I'd love to get a sense of who's here today. Go ahead and type in the chat if you are, and some of you I know wear many hats, but QMC, instructional designer, faculty, administrator, maybe you're not a QM member yet, but you really wanted to learn about research. Okay, lots of faculty, IDs, administrators, and as I expected, a very, very healthy mix of all of those things. I love it. I love it. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for coming today. So how do we support QM? Well, this is the one I think most people think about. Whenever the QM rubric is revised, which is every so many years, and we're actually going to begin the rubric revision next year, hoping that the next iteration comes out in 2023. So we provide a literature review for that because as all of you know, the rubric really is based on current online learning research, especially online learning research that deals with course quality. So we work on that literature review for many, many years, and that's something that our research colleagues help us with, and we'll talk about them a little bit more in a future slide. We also look at our own data. So we collect data from all of you. We use that to help provide better resources and support for our members, and we analyze that data. And we also work on our own continuous improvement. So we use data internally and data externally. We also create original surveys from member feedback, usually from our QMCs, our peer reviewers, and we're going to talk about some of those results this year because there were 2 QMC surveys out in 2021. We also make sure that QMPD is research supported, so those are regularly updated as well, and we assist our professional development department with that. And we host a public research library that allows you to look at all these citations that really support the rubric and support the work that all of you do in online learning. So let's talk about some specifics there. And here's where Barbara's going to start putting things in the chat. So this is a picture of our QM Research landing page. And this just kind of shows you there's a lot there for you to interact with. We're going to dive into some of these resources here that are listed. And Barbara has given you now, I believe, the link for the main landing page. There you go. Thank you, Barbara. So the research library that I mentioned, and we're going to post the link to this. How many of you knew about the QM Research Library? That you could go there to search for research that supports the rubric and also research that is related in general to quality online learning. Give me a yes or a no in the chat for that. And every year I get a few more yeses, and that really makes me happy and keeps me motivated for this. So wonderful. Okay. And I like the no's too, because now it means that I've raised your awareness about it. And also anybody can contribute to this. So if you are looking up your own research that's related to quality assurance and online learning, not just course design, we also have articles up there for quality teaching, for example, supporting students in other ways. You can make contributions to the research library. So please consider doing that and helping us to grow it. So this is public and it's freely available. You can share this link with anybody. So I mentioned internal data sharing. So this is just an example of some of the data that we look at internally. So last year for our Research Online Conference, and we'll talk about that a little bit, we had 1,558 participants register, and we wanted to see how those broke down. So it was nice to see that we had about 20% of the attendees were not QM members, and they were brand new and maybe had a chance to hear about some of what we do. For member feedback, and some of you might remember this, Barbara's going to put a link in the chat to the QM Bridge to Quality, and that there was an associated survey associated with that. So how many of you filled out that survey? It would be nice. So we wanted to know how you use the QM Bridge to Quality. This was something that we had developed, in response to the pandemic as another help and an aid to help you design good online courses. And we wanted to know how you're using it, if you needed something more or different, so that we could continuously work to improve it for you. So for all of you that responded to that survey, really appreciate it. We also provide consultations and training. So I mentioned we meet a lot with doctoral students. We also do consultations with faculty researchers and ID researchers. We have a publicly available research toolkit to help you conduct and design and conduct your own research. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And we also have workshops and presentations to help you in these endeavors as well. So the Research Toolkit is just like the Research Library, another publicly available and free resource for everybody. And it walks you through designing a research that is specific to online learning. The reason that we created this was because there are a lot of additional considerations and confounding variables and just plain confusion when it comes to designing online learning research. It is fundamentally different in many ways from other types of research that you might design that is discipline specific. So we really wanted to help kind of walk you through this, and we created that research toolkit to help you. We also have an online research workshop, and this comes in two versions. One is the pre-conference version, and Barbara's going to put that in the chat. The pre-conference version, which we're going to host at the end of October, right before the QM Connect sessions start, that is really great if you're just kind of, gaining an awareness and an understanding of online learning research. Maybe you really do want to conduct your own online learning focused research in the future, but you want to gain a better idea of what are some things you should think about, how you should approach the design, maybe some of the main research that is QM focused. If so, the pre-conference workshop is a really great option for you. We also have an asynchronous version, and that's the one that's pictured here on the slide. This is for those of you that have a fairly clear idea of a research topic or project or design that you want to pursue, and you really want some help refining that and creating a good design before you start your research. So myself and some of the research colleagues, we facilitate that, and essentially you get feedback from us, you get feedback from your colleagues that are in the workshop, and then by the end of the workshop you have a really solid research design that you can then move forward with. So two good options there for introductory level and for those of you that have a more clear idea about a research idea you want to pursue. We have lots of how-to presentations that we do for you. So I've highlighted one that's coming up at 2021 QM Connect LX, and Barbara's going to put that in the chat as well. So we've created a nice list of validated surveys for all of you to use if you want to conduct your own online learning research. There's also past ones that you can still access the slides for. One, for example, Beth McMahon, a research colleague, she did about using QM reports. And in those slides, which Barbara's put in the chat, there's also a fantastic link. So this is Heads Up QMCs. There's a link to a very nice Google Doc that Beth McMahon created that gives you step-by-step and walks you through how to use QM data and reporting tools. So that's always very handy for our QMCs. We also conduct original QM research. So we work with researchers at various member institutions. We do our own projects internally as well. Right now, we're doing a lot of work that's focused on QM implementation and creating a culture of quality, and how all of you really are implementing QM and quality assurance measures at your institution. And that's with the eye of gaining a deeper understanding for how the process can flow, things that we can help with, barriers that you might encounter that we might also have some supports for. So research colleagues, these are our folks that really help to support what QM research as a department does. There's a list for them on the website, and they do, you know, change a little bit each and every year. So one of the folks that's highlighted there is Dr. Barbara Altman, and she's one of the research colleagues that has been really instrumental in helping with the work, for example, on QM implementation. So these are folks that are already sort of dedicated to the discipline of online learning research, and they have, you know, their own interests as well, and we work with them throughout the year. And they also help to contribute to the research library and that literature review that helps with the rubric revision. We have some curated QM focused resources for you, and you can see that these are broken up by topic. So for those of you that are in K-12, there's lots of things there for K-12. We have some that are specifically focused on higher education. And then we have ones that are focused more broadly on topics like teaching and design. Okay, disseminating and discussing. So we put out white papers for lots of topics. Most recently, we had one for accessibility, which I'll show in a moment. And also before that, academic rigor, which was a wonderful series of white papers done by a research colleague as well. We also do What the Research Says QM blog posts, and we hold an annual research online conference. I call it the Rock. So that's going to happen in February again this year. And that's another thing that is free and publicly available, whether you're a QM member or not. And of course, there's Chloe, the Changing Landscape of Online Education. And that's the survey report that we partner with every year with EduVentures. So articles and information, this is just a little snapshot from that web page, but you can see there at the bottom, there's those What the Research Says articles. There's one on class size. There's also one on video length. So we're hoping to have a lot more of these in 2022. If this is something that you're interested in, whether it's a topic you're interested in seeing, or it's a topic that you're interested in writing about, please reach out to us. We're going to give our departmental address at the end so that you could contact us. But if you ever have those quick questions, I know I used to get them all the time. Do you have any research on how big should online classes be? Do you have any research on how long these videos should be? These are nice quick takes that you can share with folks at your institution and also use in your own work. We also have all these wonderful things archived. So we have an archive of the research webinars that we've done in the past. And Barbara had already put in the chat a link to our past presentations, I believe, for the Research Online Conference. So if you feel like, oh, I missed a lot, you didn't, because we have a lot of these things archived for you so that if you want to watch them or watch them again, they're available. So this was our conference from last year, Active Applied Research and Online Learning and Quality Assurance. Like I said, we're going to be doing this again next year, same time in February. And the focus is always going to be on how to apply this research. So, you know, instead of doing presentations that simply share the research, all of the presenters are asked to talk about it, and then also talk about ways that people can use this research in their work for quality online learning. So each presentation was associated with a takeaway sheet, so that you have something that you can use. If you heard a great research idea or something, you know, an application technique, there's some nice takeaways there. And all those takeaway sheets are also archived and listed on the website. So this is the white paper series on accessibility. We rolled these out over 2020 and 2021. This was done by Doctors Barbara Fry and Ray Mancia. Really great series on accessibility that looks at it from a number of different angles. I encourage you to check it out if you haven't already. We're also going to give you a little bonus slide at the end because those two authors are editing a book on accessibility, and the call for proposals is out. So if accessibility is a research topic, especially of interest to you, if you're working a lot with accessibility on your campus and you really have some good ideas and techniques to share for how you've done it well, I encourage you to put in a proposal for their book. We also have the Chloe report. So for those of you that are not familiar with Chloe, this is the changing landscape of online education. We just put out the 6th report, and it's a unique survey report in that it looks at the perspectives of your chief online officer. So even if that person is not called the chief online officer at your institution, they can go by a variety of names, but that person that essentially is really instrumentally in charge of online learning. So that's a more macro level, holistic view. And we ask them each year about what are the changing trends, things related to online learning strategy, definitely things looking at quality assurance and faculty support and student support. So all those things that we're interested in, that's what Chloe examines each and every year. So we're right now formulating the survey for Chloe 7. Okay. And lastly, I wanted to talk about QMC surveys. So we had 2 surveys out this year. One was for all QMCs and one was for a more select group of quality matters coordinators that were at certain institutions. But give me a yes in the chat if any of you filled out the survey. So there was a big one about how you use the rubric and conduct reviews, and we're going to talk about that first. Give me a yes in the chat because I want to thank you. Lacey Kidder, thank you. Okay. All right. So I really want you to know sincerely that we appreciate when you engage in these surveys. And one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about the surveys during this webinar was that so you see that we are using your feedback, we are using your data, we know that we're asking time of you when you fill these out, and it really is being put to use to better serve our membership. So for all of you that filled it out, I appreciate it. For all of you that didn't have a chance to fill it out, we're going to have some more QMC surveys in 2022. I'm hoping that this is something that we could do annually. So when you do get that information, please do take a moment and fill it out. So first, let's talk about the big QMC survey. And we're calling this by shorthand, the Flex survey. So our research question that we really wanted to explore was, how are you as QM higher ed members flexing the rubric and reviews? Meaning, what are some non-traditional ways maybe that you're utilizing the rubric? Or what are some types of reviews that you're conducting at your institution that maybe aren't on our radar, but if we knew about them, we could help you conduct them. So we sent out invitations to 1,083 of our higher ed members, and we received 176 responses. So our response rate was not super, but we have a bonus here in that we had a defined population. So because we have data for the characteristics of our higher ed membership and our K through 12 membership as well, we were able to compare our survey respondents, our sample, with our larger population. And there was no significant difference in terms of institutional type, public versus private, or 2-year versus 4-year. There was no difference with geographic region or length of membership or number of QM certified courses. There was one difference for those that chose to fill out the survey versus our larger population, and that is that they had a higher percentage of internal reviews, which kind of makes sense because it's a survey about how are you using the rubric and conducting reviews. So we did dive a little bit deeper into that data and found that really what was throwing that off was that there's a lot of our membership that hasn't ever conducted an internal review. So for those of you, and let me ask it now in the chat, have you not conducted internal reviews yet at your institution? Give me a no if you've never conducted an internal review at your institution. Okay. See, this is totally enlightening information. I love it. Okay. So this tells me that there is either a barrier there that we could investigate, or there's something additional that we could do to support or help you do internal and institutionally focused reviews. All right. So one of the questions that we asked on that survey was, for what purposes or goals do you use the QM rubric? And I put the top answers here, those that were listed at 50% or above. So this was a pretty in-depth survey. There was lots to look at, but I only selected a couple things to share with you today. So the vast majority, you can see there, 93% said that they use it as a design guide. And personally, for me, that was a little bit of a surprise that it came out over the 86% who said to review online courses, right? But this really helped us understand that even though the QM rubric is meant to evaluate a course once it's designed, and hopefully once it's been taught once or twice, that the vast majority of you are still using it in a different way as well. And that's as a help or an aid to design your courses. So again, great use, for the rubric, but also go back to that Bridge to Quality Design Guide, because that was created as a nice companion for the rubric so that faculty have that help as they're designing their course. And then you can use the rubric to evaluate to see what standards are met after that course has been designed. 84% of you said that you use the QM rubric to assure minimum levels of quality. So a lot of internal and institutional focus there. That's where we also saw institutions that were doing a lot of those internal reviews. In some cases, some of you are using it also as external benchmarking. So when you're comparing yourself against peer institutions and the online courses and programs that they offer, and ensuring minimum quality in some cases also extends to communicating it to students. So making sure that prospective students and current students know that your institution is really devoted to doing well by them, right? And offering good quality online learning. 77% of you reported that you use the rubric as part of your faculty professional development. And we're going to hop over to that last column because 54% of you reported using it as professional development for your DL staff. So in working with instructional designers, for example, or educational technologists. And then 61% connected it to accreditation. And that's not a really big surprise as well, because of course, accreditation really looks at whether or not your institution is offering quality learning to your students. So that's a very frequent connection that we see. Where are you using the QM rubric? So 37%, not a majority, are using it throughout their institution. 29% are utilizing it more in certain departments and programs, even though it's available for the whole institution. 18% of you are using it only in certain departments or programs. And then we had 16% that really it was a unique situation or they were combining a lot of those. Oh, I see a good question in the chat. Thank you. DL means distance learning. I'm sorry if I use abbreviations, please let me know if there's any abbreviations that I use that you need me to explain. But what does this portrait look like at your institution? Do you use it institution-wide, for example, or is it concentrated more within certain programs or colleges or departments, depending on how your institution is organized? I'd like to get a sense maybe if our audience kind of echoes what was in the survey or not. So we're using QM throughout the whole institution. Okay, and I have other right off the back. Thanks. So it is complicated. I like it. Lots of institution-wide, okay. Okay, institution-wide, but maybe not everybody's participating. Okay, I see a couple departments and programs. Okay, and those others that were in the survey and the others that are also sprinkled in the chat, that also speaks to the fact that it's complex. Implementation is complex. It is unique to the institutional context. And sometimes there's very unique ways that you really want to talk about quality assurance or use QM at your institution. Okay, this was one of the big questions that we really wanted your feedback on because, as I mentioned, we are going to be working on the rubric revision. So we wanted to hear from you now that we have a lot of courses, especially since the emergency remote learning shift and since the pandemic has started. All of you know this. There's a lot more courses now that are being delivered synchronously online as opposed to what had been the traditional mode asynchronously online. And then we have other different modalities that are gaining in popularity. So they're not new, but they're gaining in popularity like HighFlex and synchronous for that matters. Synchronous was one of the predominant methods in the very early days when distance learning moved to a web-based format. So 46% of you, almost half of you, said that there should be additional information for synchronous or HighFlex courses in the rubric. And that's the question that we really wanted you to answer for us. So we wanted to reflect these newer modalities that are out there now. And we thought, is it okay to include them in the annotation and give specific considerations and guidelines similar to what we already do for blended courses and competency-based courses? Or is this something that necessitates a whole new rubric, right? And that would introduce complexity though, because if you're then using two rubrics at your institution, one for asynchronous and one for synchronous, that would be very difficult to implement. So I was very pleased that, predominantly the response was this is something that can be included in the annotations. And this is going to take a lot of good thought, right? So that we can create a rubric that can be used for all of these different modalities that are newly popular or newly resurfaced during the pandemic. Okay. The other research that I wanted to talk about today is research that is focused on QM implementation. So this is a little preview and a snippet from an article that is going to be published in the American Journal of Distance Education. I did check with them, and I think that it should be available online towards the end of the year, and it should be in the hard copy publication during the first part of 2022. So this was a really big project, and this is this year's effort for QM implementation. We've actually been working on researching QM implementation for several years now, because we know that this is one of the biggest struggles and hurdles that especially our QMCs encounter at their institutions. How do we move this forward? How do we have the right conversations? What's the right approach given our institutional context? And because there are so many institutions and they all have their unique context, their unique goals and needs, it's a very difficult thing to say, okay, everybody can be helped in this way. We really have to keep talking with you about it, right? And learn more about how you're implementing it at your institution and what are some of those barriers, what are some of the goals and whatnot. So this year's effort was a really big one. We took a mixed methods approach to the design. So it included a quantitative survey that also had some open-ended questions. And then we also did some qualitative interviews as follow-ups to that. By any chance, do I have anybody on the call today who was part of the QM implementation research survey? So this was sent out to QMCs that were at institutions that really showed high levels of QM activity, meaning you had high levels of QM professional development, you had high levels of internal reviews in the course review management system, you had high levels of QM certified reviews and a couple other metrics that we looked at. So it was a smaller group. So we had this defined population of 109 institutions, and we sent it out to their QMCs. So we got 43 survey responses. Our response rate was 39%. So again, it's a small sample, but what we did was the same population comparison that we did, very similar to the Flex survey. We looked at the sample for the survey respondents and compared that to that larger population, because again, it was a defined population that we had data on. And then we also looked at the qualitative interview respondents and compared that to the larger defined population of those high activity institutions. So no significant difference there. And that allows us to have greater faith that what was reported by those who did respond is reflective of that larger population. But again, this is just one specific population of those high activity institutions. So our research question for the survey was, what goals, supports, people, policies, and processes are related to higher implementation activity on internal reviews, QM certified reviews, and QM faculty professional development? So those were our 3 activity variables, if you want to think of them like that. And then look at all that we were trying to examine: goals, supports. What are the people on your campus that help with that? Are there policies that help with that? Are there processes that you've developed that help with that? So this really was an exploratory study. There is not a lot of research done specifically for this type of implementation. So of course, because it's QM focused, we were looking at course design quality implementation, right? There is the broader, though, quality assurance for online learning implementation. But this looks specifically at that and using institutions in sort of a case study approach that are using the QM framework. And one of the reasons that's really beneficial to us that we have the QM framework that our members use is because this allows us a way to really study how implementation happens, because you're using the same supports and tools and framework. You may be applying it or extending it in different ways at your institution, but no other rubric has that framework around it for implementation that really allows us a clear window into how course quality implementation happens and what are some of the best ways to make it happen at an institution. So for the follow-up qualitative interviews, and these were for survey respondents who opted in to doing a qualitative interview, we had 3 additional questions that we asked them. What supports, people, policies, and practices were key drivers for quality assurance implementation at your institution? What effect did QM implementation have on your institutional culture? And that's a really big question, because what we're really trying to explore here in a larger way, in a lasting way, is how do you create a culture of quality at your institution? And that means not viewing it as we're going to certify all the courses, or we're going to have a lot of APP QMR workshops. Those are things that might help you implement and help you create that culture of quality. But when I say culture of quality, what I'm talking about is that buy-in on an institutional level, that you all are working towards quality assurance for your online courses and programs, focused on delivering good quality offerings for your online students as well, but really that it's a group effort, that there have been inclusive collegial conversations from the start. And really including people and getting that buy-in so that it's not a top-down approach. It's something that everybody at the institution contributes to and works towards. The last question that we asked those QMCs: what barriers to QM implementation did you experience and how did you address them? So again, we want to look at those barriers because that might help us as Quality Matters identify some ways that we could create resources and supports and tools to help you overcome those barriers. So here's a snapshot, and this really is only a snapshot. It's one of the longest articles that I've ever written, and there were many wonderful co-authors on this, including 2 research colleagues, Barb Altman and Beth McMahon, and Whitney Zimmerman as well, 3 research colleagues, and then Lee Hopp from our own QM research department and our data analyst. So there is a lot, and I really do encourage you to check out the article when it comes out, but I wanted to highlight just some key findings here for you today. So for our high activity institutions that were included in this study, 70% had an implementation plan, right? And in some cases, they didn't have a full plan, but they had goals towards institutional quality assurance. So this is one thing to consider. Do you have goals in mind? And do you have a plan to reach those goals? So if you're a QMC and you're at today's webinar, I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to take the QMC training. It's free. And that's one of the first places that you're going to encounter creating an implementation plan, which is something that really should not be done in isolation. That is the conversation and the goal that you can take back to your institutional stakeholders and talk with your administrators, talk with your faculty, especially look at what financial support your institution might want to contribute to the goals that they have for quality online learning. So 70% had an implementation plan, and coinciding with that, because I think these two things go hand in hand, 63% had a committee of stakeholders who were invested in online learning. That speaks to the inclusiveness, the collegiality, the collaboration that really needs to happen to create that culture of quality and move forward with quality assurance implementation. So these committee of stakeholders, that includes faculty, distance learning staff, such as instructional designers, potentially folks from the IT department, those that are running the LMS, as well as pertinent administrators. A lot of institutions also include online students on this so that you can always have that student perspective and lens and feedback. 90% reported that instructional designers were knowledgeable about how QM was being used at the institution. So these are supports. I know that when I was at institution, the IDs were the fundamental personnel by and large that really assisted faculty in designing good quality online courses. And the survey report speaks to that you're training, you're supporting them in taking QM professional development and training, and that your IDs are the group that is most knowledgeable about quality matters. Where are my IDs at? Give me a yes in the chat, because I love instructional designers. Yes, if you're not already a member of QM IDA, I encourage you to join that. We are going to have a sort of research and QM IDA. We're going to join forces, Wonder Twin Powers activate for the next QM Idle webinar that's going to be on October 1st. So it's about ID researchers because we really value instructional designers. Also, additional supports that help faculty create wonderful online courses. 75% of these high activity institutions had LMS templates. And I know that these are called different things at your institution, and some of you might cringe when you hear the word template, but let me define what I mean by that. What I mean is something that's in your LMS that starts with good organization and navigation. It doesn't impose a specific pedagogical approach. It doesn't force you to design your course in a certain way. It doesn't force faculty to use certain content over others. It just means that, frankly, if you're faculty designing your online course, you start ahead of the game, that you don't have to think about web-based navigational layout, because most of us were not trained in that. Many LMS templates also embed QM standards for things like General Standard 7, learner support, right? They've already looked at things like accessibility in the navigation, and 8.1 is navigation logical, consistent, and efficient. And similar to that, 70% of these institutions offered syllabus templates. So for many of you that have created or are going to create syllabi for online classes, you know that there's some specific policies, there's unique things that you have to talk about. And instead of making faculty try to remember all of those things or learn and then include them, many institutions offer some syllabus templates that have some online policies and suggested language for that included. So give me a yes in the chat. Do any of you offer LMS templates or syllabus templates as a way to help faculty and instructional designers? Yes, okay. Okay. Yes. All right. All those yeses make me happy. I truly think that this is one of the best ways that we can support faculty, because as many of you know, it takes so long to create a good online course. And the last thing that I want faculty to be thinking about is web-based navigation and layout, right? They are the experts in their discipline and on the course topic. So I think this helps them a great deal. 77% of the high activity institutions also reported that they had faculty development staff that was knowledgeable about online learning and online pedagogy. So in some cases, these are folks that might be embedded in your centers for teaching and learning. In other cases, these might be folks that are associated with your online learning office or even your IT office in some cases. Yes, John, excellent comment. I just noticed it in the chat. Templates support learners as well through consistency. Absolutely. And actually, that's one of the topics that I'd like to do a what the research says post on for next year, things about templates, because you're absolutely right, John. They support your students. Your students then, every time they go into an online class at your institution, they don't have to relearn the layout. They know where everything is, and that means they can get started on course topics from day one. Yes, very good point. So internal reviews, these were not all of the correlations that we found for internal reviews, but these were selected ones. So there's a lot of wonderful descriptive statistics that are associated with the article that really kind of paint a portrait of these institutions that are at higher levels of implementation. But we also ran correlations for our 3 activity variables of internal course reviews, professional development activity, and then QM certified reviews. And these are some of the ones that were positively correlated with high internal course review activity. Ensuring that faculty who are teaching online receive a minimum level of PD, celebrating faculty achievements, recognizing faculty achievements in reappointment, promotion, and tenure processes. Again, syllabus templates, you see the templates there. Having clearly articulated minimum standards for quality online learning. So this to me speaks to support, right? This is starting to show that picture. So any of you that have attended webinars with me previously, you know that I think of data as telling a story, right? So we got all this data back from the implementation research. That was the goal, to see what story you are telling us about implementation on your campuses. And here the picture is, we are supporting faculty, we're celebrating faculty, we're encouraging faculty. And this goes against, that top-down approach that is sometimes taken, right? That we know faculty don't respond well to, staff does not respond well to. This speaks to that portrait of support. So I was really happy to see that these faculty-friendly, topics, ideas, things, and goals really were associated with higher levels of QM implementation. That is very meaningful data. So some recommendations that came out of that study, and again, this is a summary of a very long article, but first and foremost, choose the right person to lead the effort. So this is the second piece of research that we have now that has showed very clearly, like above and beyond any other finding, that implementation lead is crucial, right? In most cases, that is the QMC, the Quality Matters Coordinator. But the implementation research that I'm talking about here, that really portrayed that QMC as a specific individual. By and large, they were individuals who had more than a decade of experience in higher education. They were older. And those things really helped them have these inclusive, crucial conversations with all of these different audiences and stakeholders. So you need to speak with faculty, you need to speak with distance learning staff, you need to speak with administrators, you need to speak with students as well, right? So choosing that right person to lead the effort. And in most cases, it's not just one person that moves it through. The best approach is to really have this collaboration amongst stakeholders rather than to center it on one individual, because you might have one rock star that can move implementation forward at your institution, but think to yourself, what if that person leaves? Is that going to derail your implementation efforts? Right? So thinking about it as a collaboration of invested stakeholders really is something that can drive that implementation forward in good and positive ways. Center faculty inclusive practices and approach. And that goes along with that fourth one there, supporting faculty with templates, good design processes. So a lot of what we found out in this research is that you need to include faculty from the beginning, include them in the conversation, and then encourage them towards designing and teaching quality online courses by supporting them in that endeavor with things like template, with things like instructional design help, good design processes. And then when they put that effort in, celebrate those accomplishments and recognize them. So it's not just about celebrating them as an institution and, really conveying to stakeholders and again to prospective students that this is something that your institution values, but also recognizing the time intensive effort it takes to have a QM certified course and including that in the promotion and tenure process as well. So that came out very clearly, as did administrative and financial support. Implementation is very hard to achieve without administrative support, without good financial support. One of the interesting findings, in fact, was that for these high activity institutions, administration had a high level of knowledge about how QM was being implemented at the institution. So if you have not yet connected with your administrators, especially those that are associated with accreditation, this is a cue to maybe reach out and have those conversations so that they understand how crucial quality assurance and QM implementation is to those institutional goals. That next one there, again, speaking to multiple stakeholders. So that idea of collaboration, inclusivity, multiple stakeholders driving towards this effort, plus connecting it to your institutional strategy. And by that, I mean looking at your institutional goals related to quality learning. What have you promised students, for example, right? What are ways that quality online courses and programs can support the goals that you have for students, can support your accreditation goals, can support your benchmarking goals even? That's what spurs that creation of a culture of quality, which again is an inclusive movement at your institution saying we all want to move forward in this way. And we might have differences of opinion, but we're really going to collaborate and talk those through because this is aligned with what we want to do as an institution. This meets our goals for what we said we would deliver to our students. And then finally, again, recognizing the effort and celebrating successes. That's not just for faculty, that's for distance learning staff as well, including our instructional designers. Okay, so finally, and then I'm gonna see what questions are in the Q&A. This again is our research landing page. There is a printable PDF there if you want to share more about QM research with peers that are not at your institution or somebody that is at your institution. And Barbara just put that PDF in the chat. Thank you, Barbara. So we're going to come back to questions and comments in 1 second. I want to go through these final slides so that we are uninterrupted in our Q&A answering. So a little bit about Quality Matters, as you know. All right, we provide the scalable quality assurance system, and that has part and parcel with implementation. Also, I wanted to let everybody know, if it's not already on your radar, QM Connect LX is happening in November. And as I mentioned before, we're going to have pre-conference workshops that are going to be the last week in October. So just prior to this, it is virtual this year, so no problem with traveling, no issues with that. Definitely something to check out. This I already mentioned, and here's the link for this as well. So for those of you that are interested in accessibility, that are doing great things with accessibility at your institution, please do consider putting in a proposal for the book that Dr. Barbara Fry and Dr. Ray Mancia are working on. This is with the support of QM. So this is the first time that we're collaborating with some community researchers on an effort like this. I would love to see some great contributions from all of you. So the deadline there is October 1st, which means you have plenty of time. You have plenty of time. And it's just the proposal that you need to get in by October 1st. Okay. So I'm going to leave up this verification of attendance. I know some of you need that and you'd like to take screenshots of that. And in the meantime, I'm going to look at the Q&A. Okay. Is QM considering a rubric for hybrid or high flex courses? Any progress on IDs being able to be certified without having taught over the last 18 months? Good questions, and I have answers this time, Jennifer. Yes, wonderful question. I appreciate it. So as I mentioned, we are looking now at the rubric revision, doing that work in 2022 with hopefully releasing it in 2023. And this is something that we're still discussing. This is something that we'll discuss with the rubric revision committee, but it could be, hybrid courses are already included in the annotations in the rubric. And it could be that we are able to reflect information on synchronous courses and high flex courses as well using the annotations. which I think would be a lot easier for you as our membership rather than having multiple rubrics for each modality. So that right now is what we're talking about. But as you can imagine, it's a complex problem. Any progress on IDs being able to be certified? Yes, absolutely. And actually, we're going to talk all about that at the next QMC meeting. We are holding that in October. I'm going to do like a full report out on that and talk more in depth about that. But yes is the short answer to that. So for those of you that are QMCs, you'll be receiving information about registering for that QMC webinar that we're going to hold in October. I think it's October 21st. Okay, what is the value of you conducting research to show that QM improves student learning outcomes at your institution if the QM rubric is based on research that already shows that courses designed to QM standards improve student learning outcomes? Okay, that's actually a really good question. So the QM rubric is supported by research that's related to quality online course design, things that support students, right, et cetera. But QM as an organization has no access to student data at your institution, right? And it's actually very difficult to do research that shows, okay, I revised this course, it's met QM standards, and now all students are getting good grades. So let me go into that just a little bit, because this is the answer to your question. The answer to your question is we need institutions to conduct that research. Not all student demographics, are the same. Not all students are served the same, and not all course revisions and designs are the same. So what you're really talking about is a before and after study. That's kind of what we call it here, before and after. So maybe you have a course that currently does not meet QM standards and you want to revise it to meet QM standards, and then see if there's an increase in things like student satisfaction or student grades, right? This is difficult to do because first you really need to get all that baseline data. You need to review the current course, know which standards were not yet met. You need student demographics, student grades, student satisfaction, whatever your student variables are for the original version of that course. Then when you redesign it to meet QM standards, you need to document every change that you made, because once you run it again, right, and you see that you have maybe increased performance in terms of student grades, how will you know what affected that? Right? So that's just a small snapshot into how complex this research can be. And QM can't do that research because we do not have that student data. We can work with you and consult with you to do this research though. The other thing that makes this complex is that, for many of you, you know that QM also has the quality pie, right? Which recognizes that course design is just one small aspect, just one piece of quality assurance and online learning. So even if you design a course to meet quality standards, that's not the magic bullet. The other questions are, do you have institutional supports for those students, like an online student orientation? Is the faculty member who's teaching that course, are they prepared to teach well and effectively online, right? Is your institution supporting online students as well? So all of those things go into it. QM and the QM rubric is solely about course design. And it is not solely course design that results in increases in student grades or increases in student satisfaction, right? So very interested in any of you that want to conduct that type of research. I hope that did answer your question. I thought it was a very good one. QM did not, okay, can you please confirm? QM did not select their standards and cherry pick the research to support the standards. Rather, QM evaluated the research first and then created the rubric to align with the research. Yes, the latter. So just a little bit of a history on QM here. So QM was started, it stemmed from a FIPSI grant, which is a federal education grant. And it really was a group of faculty and those folks that were involved in online learning. This was at the consortium of schools in Maryland known as Maryland Online. And they started teaching online and they realized that this is fundamentally different. We need to design courses in a different way. So they received this federal education grant, and the goal was to create a rubric that looked at standards for online design, quality online design, and have that be shareable and usable with faculty nationwide. And I don't know if they thought about international at the time, but now, you know, we're utilized in 30 countries, so it definitely is international. And so, yes, their first and foremost goal was to look at the research. Everything stems and is supported by research, right? Now, since that time, so the original rubric really was supported by research, created by those who were doing online teaching at that time, experts really at that time in online learning. And since then, with the subsequent rubric revisions, they're all supported by the latest in research. So the rubric revision committee, they receive essentially a very large and in-depth literature review, because myself and the research colleagues, we're scouring the online learning research every day almost, right? And so especially because there's several years in between the rubric revisions, we have years of research. So we also try to highlight some themes. Is there anything new that we know now? Is there anything you know, on our radar, the research is talking about that the rubric should reflect that currently it does not? So for example, one of the things that we'll be looking at in the rubric revision is more things on inclusive design. So culturally responsive design, design that is inclusive of all students as well, and reflective of all of our students and the wide diversity of students. So that's how the rubric matures. It matures in response not just to the latest online learning research, but also that huge community of practitioners that engage with us on the rubric revision. So faculty, instructional designers, Centers for Teaching and Learning staff that are really focused on online pedagogy, for example. So yes, it was supported and founded in research, continues to be, and is also refined with the experiential knowledge of folks like you from the community. All right, so I see that we have just a couple minutes left. Any questions in the chat that I missed, Barbara?
Takes me a second to unmute.
I know.
I
Sorry.
think we're all right. I think we're all right in the chat. Let's see, one more question, it looks like, in the Q&A.
No, I got that.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. All right. I think that is it for us today. If there's not any other questions, you can put them in the chat, or oh, we do have one question. Okay. Can you provide a link in the chat on QM research data that supports improved student performance outcomes? Yes, some of that, Sylvia, is in the what we're learning from QM research. So there's one on our website that speaks to that. And also Kay, who is the original research person at QM, I now refer to her as the emeritus QM research director. She's actually working on an updated version of that. And so we hope to have that delivered in 2022. Yes. So that is something, thank you. That's a good reminder. Thank you, Sylvia. That is something that, that we work to update as well. And again, though, QM focused research with regard to connecting it explicitly to student performance is something that QM cannot do without you, right? We do not have access to student data, nor should we, right? So if that is research that you're interested in conducting, please do reach out to us. Barbara, can you put our email, whether it's departmental email or you want to put your email in the chat, anything like that? If that's something that you want to talk about and connect with us on so that we could have more good research on that, please do. Very much looking forward to more conversations on that, because I feel we need more data, but I can't do it alone, right? I'm not connected to your students. So we do have some research out there. Would love to grow it for any of you that are interested in reaching out and connecting with us on that. Okay, so as Barbara just put in the chat, the recording will be emailed to you next week. That's all the time that I have today, but thank you all so much for spending an hour with me. I hope that this was informative. I hope we gave you some new ways that maybe weren't on your radar for how we support you, how we support QM with research as well. And if you have any questions or anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to engage with you. Thank you so much.